All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to get into a story about a system that just completely failed, and, more importantly, about the generation that just refused to accept it. We are talking about the massive student uprising in India, all centered around their public recruitment exams.
So I want to start with a big question here. Just think about it for a second. What does it take to push an entire generation of students, we're talking hundreds of thousands of them, to just drop everything, leave their studies, and hit the streets in protest? What's the breaking point?
Well, in this case, the answer is both incredibly simple and, honestly, deeply frustrating. It all came down to a broken promise. You know, that core promise that if you just work hard, you play by the rules, you'll get a fair shot. That promise was shattered.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. To really get why everyone was so angry, you have to picture the absolute disaster that went down on exam day. And I'm not talking about a minor hiccup here. No, this was a complete top-to-bottom system meltdown.
Seriously, this wasn't just one thing going wrong. It was a whole cascade of failures. Just try to imagine this. You've been studying for months, right? You show up and the exam is just canceled. No warning. Or maybe you get to start, but your computer crashes halfway through. Biometric systems that are supposed to verify who you are, they failed, locking students out. And the logistics? Oh man, they were just baffling. Get this, some students from a city called Jaipur were told their exam center was in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. That's thousands of kilometers away. It's just absurd.
And all of that chaos, all of that frustration, it boiled down to this one powerful sentiment that just exploded across social media. It really captures the feeling perfectly. For these students, this was not just some IT problem. This was their future, their entire career path, being shrugged off as a simple technical glitch. You can imagine how insulting that felt.
So you gotta ask, who was running this whole show? Well, it turns out the exams were outsourced to a private vendor called Eduquity. And that detail, it was like pouring gasoline on the fire. Why? Because this company was already allegedly linked to a pretty notorious recruitment scam from the past. For the students, this wasn't just about incompetence anymore. It raised huge red flags about trust and integrity. Okay, so this level of frustration, it wasn't going to stay locked away in a few exam centers. No way. So let's look at how all this individual anger came together, connected, and then just exploded into a single, unified, nationwide movement. And the scale of this thing, it was just massive. In India, you'll hear the term lakhs, which means 100,000. And we're talking about lakhs of people here. That's hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of students, and even their teachers all coming together. This wasn't some small fringe protest. This was a huge chunk of the country's youth all saying the same thing. Enough is enough.
What's really interesting is how they fought this battle. It was a modern protest waged on two different fronts at the same time. On one side, you had the online world. Hashtags like SSM mismanagement just took over social media, grabbing national attention. And on the other side, all that digital anger spilled out into the real world. You had huge physical demonstrations, especially on the streets of the capital, Delhi.
Now, whenever you have large crowds and emotions running this high, things can get tense. And that's exactly what happened. Here, the story gets a little murky because we have conflicting reports. On one side, you have protesters and some political leaders who allege that police used excessive force, things like lathi charges, which are baton charges. But on the other side, officials completely deny that any major use of force happened. So to be clear, we're just laying out what both sides claim.
So, okay, we've talked about the anger and the protests, but what did the students actually want? This is so important, because they weren't just out there shouting for the sake of it. No. They had a very clear, very specific set of demands. They had a plan to actually fix the system.
And their demands basically laid out a 4-step roadmap for reform. It's super logical. Step 1, re-examine. Pretty simple, right? Hold fair retests for every single student who was affected. Step 2, investigate. Launch a real, time-bound investigation into what went wrong, including the paper leak allegations. Step 3, blacklist. Hold the vendor, this Eduquity company, accountable and kick them out. And finally, step 4, communicate. Just talk to us. No more radio silence from the SSC.
So the big question is, did any of this work? Did all that pressure actually lead to anything? And the short answer is yes, absolutely. The sheer scale of this movement forced the people in charge to not just listen, but to actually do something.
And you can see the cause and effect play out so clearly on this timeline from August 2025. Look at this. Early August, you have the exam chaos that kicks everything off. That directly triggers the nationwide protests. By the middle of the month, boom, the SSC pledges retests for up to 55,000 candidates. Then, by late August, the government itself steps in, asking for a week to think about major reforms. And the final domino to fall? In September, a massive upcoming exam, the CGL 2025, gets postponed. There's no doubt about it. The students had made their voices heard loud and clear.
So let's just recap the ripple effects here, the concrete wins for the protesters. First, that huge CGL exam, postponed. That's a direct result. The students who went through the chaos, they got a pledge for retests. And for the future, the commission promised to bring in new AI safeguards to stop this from ever happening again. These weren't just vague promises. These were tangible, real-world victories.
All right, let's pull back for a second and look at the bigger picture here, because it's really easy to just see this as a story about one messed up exam. But the reason this blew up into a national movement is because it's about something so much bigger than that.
You have to understand, for millions and millions of young people in India, these government exams are one of the main ways to get a stable career, to build a better life. It's a huge deal. And that's why this was never, ever just about a technical glitch. This was a fight for something fundamental, a fight for a fair chance, a fight for a system that's transparent, that's honest, and that gives everyone an equal shot at building a future.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really critical question. Yeah, the students won some major concessions, they got exams postponed, they got promises of reform, but the real question is, will it last? Will this actually lead to permanent, lasting change and a fairer system for everyone? Or was this just round one of a much longer fight for fairness and accountability? That's the question that millions of young Indians are still waiting to have answered.